All right. So Debbie, I'm very excited to have you today on our webinar series. And for everybody, this is Debbie Skerly, and she is the Executive Vice President of A2B Fulfillment. And I'm excited because A, we've been doing business for a long time, and B, that you have so much valuable information to give to the people that we're talking to in this webinar about direct-to-consumer marketing, but specifically fulfillment. So I know I had a couple of questions I wanted to get to right away, but before we do that, tell me a little bit about what A2B is, what your role is as Executive Vice President, and how you've seen this evolve, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. Just reading your white papers, things have evolved immensely.
Correct. Well, thank you for having me today. Yeah, so A2B Fulfillment, we are a third-party logistics provider. We really do offer a turnkey solution for people, and then we also offer our services a la carte as well, depending on what their needs are. But we offer everything from an order management system, of course, the warehousing and storing the product, the pick, pack, and shipping. We actually do both direct-to-consumer fulfillment. We also do retail fulfillment as well, where we're shipping in bulk to distribution centers, we're shipping to stores directly. And then one thing that's becoming really popular with retailers is drop shipping. That is ultimately a direct-to-consumer shipment, but most retailers want the package to have the look and feel as if it's coming from them. So it's branded with Target's, the packing slip has the look and feel as if it's coming from Target, the package, the label itself. So we do a lot of drop shipping. We do a lot with Amazon, both, from an FBA perspective, FBM, fulfilled by merchant. We also do seller fulfilled, Amazon Prime as well. We offer live agent via phone, customer service via email, chat, and social media is becoming more and more popular. For some of our customers with a younger demographic, 100% of the customer service is all on social media. So that has changed a lot in the last few years in terms of really, depending on the demographic, really shifting towards social media.
So actually, it should be A to Z fulfillment. You do everything from A to Z, because my head hurts on how much you guys do.
We do a lot. That's something I always get asked. Why is it A to B and not A to Z? And I always say, well, you have to get to B before you can get to Z.
Exactly.
But yes, we do a lot.
So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically, and specifically for the audience who'll be listening to this webinar, their businesses, their brands, they typically have their own fulfillment because they're a brand. They're shipping directly to a consumer, not even to a consumer. In very, very small cases they are, but mostly to that retailer. So if a brand or a company or a business is getting into the direct-to-consumer business, why is it important to have a third-party 3PL for them to be successful in the direct-to-consumer?
That's a great question. So first and foremost, retail fulfillment is very different than direct-to-consumer fulfillment.
Can you just say that one more time? I want people to hear that very clearly.
Retail fulfillment is very different from direct-to-consumer fulfillment. I hear time and time again taking calls from people that are in just a complete panic state because they have made the switch to direct-to-consumer. They've launched an e-commerce site, and their current 3PL or even their own warehouse where they were doing 100% retail said, oh, we can do it, and quickly realized they can't. And now they're scrambling because everything's a mess. Their customers are mad. And so it is very different. And so why is it different? With retail fulfillment, you are typically shipping in bulk, meaning you're shipping pallets to distribution centers. Now, that alone is also complex because every retailer has different routing guidelines, and you've got to comply to their guidelines or they fine you. And so, pallets have to be stacked a certain height and labels have to go, 2 inches here and 5 inches up. And so, understanding that alone is complex. But where direct to consumer is different, you now are no longer pulling a full pallet and moving that. You are opening a box and taking out individual components, and it's more of a picking and packing process.
Just the labor aspect that you talked about.
Absolutely. And with that, most people, most warehouses that are really designed and geared towards retail, their systems don't support direct to consumer. Because now you're not picking in pallet quantities, you're not picking in case quantities, you're picking in eaches. You're breaking open those cases, and just tracking inventory alone, that's incredibly important. Not all systems can support the different units of measure. So having somebody that understands direct to consumer is key. To something as simple as having a system generate a packing slip, or having a sophisticated shipping system that rate shops that package and sends it the cheapest method possible, to sending a shipment confirmation email to the customer, letting them know their order has shipped. Those are different systems in place to support all of those, and those things are incredibly important with direct to consumer. And
especially because for the consumers expecting that today, when you go,
exactly.
Right, if you're doing to a retailer, they figure it's coming. But when you're talking to that customer, you are now the face of that business, right?
Absolutely. And even with all of those proactive notifications going to the customer, that's a branding opportunity also.
Yes.
Because, you have verbiage on the packing slip, you have verbiage on the shipment confirmation email. You can, if you're a product that is on subscription and it's somebody ordering one time, you can gear the verbiage towards, getting them to go to the subscription model. So it is a big branding opportunity. The other thing that I think is so important to not discount is the brand. And with social media these days, if somebody has a bad experience, so let's say you're working with a fulfillment company or doing it yourself, and you only know how to do retail, and suddenly now you have all these orders coming in, and sometimes all the orders may be the same, but sometimes every order could be different. And by messing it up, by shipping the wrong product, by taking too long, by not communicating with your customer, that gives that consumer an opportunity to go onto social media and let them know about the experience. And so many, I have seen some brands, unfortunately, have some challenges with social media. And I
have seen those conversations. I have seen what it looks like in the C-suite when stuff like that goes on. Because one of the things we were talking about earlier is that a client that we shared together was Keurig, and they could ship 5 million Keurig machines, but they can't ship one. And that's the difference. So if you can kind of elaborate on that a little bit, the ability to have that customer experience with the brand by getting one coffee machine is a totally different mechanism than putting out 5,000 that are going to Target.
Very much so. It is. It all comes down to the systems, and for us as a company, our retail orders get released to the floor separate and differently from our consumer orders. They typically get packed and prepped by different teams. But with Keurig as the example, we have customers that have thousands of SKUs, thousands. Every order could be different.
Right.
And so, it's having all of those procedures in place, the systems in place, so it can support picking, being accurate, and reconciling the inventory while all of that's happening, but also having that scalability also.
Yes.
That's one thing that I'm hearing a lot of right now with unfortunately everything we're going through with COVID, is that a lot of facilities, either customers with their own warehouses or if they're outsourcing to another partner, they don't have that scalability. They can't handle that increase in volume. And especially right now with e-commerce. The numbers just came out, I think it was last week for Q2, e-commerce was at 44.4%.
Right.
And like unheard of numbers. It's never seen an increase like this. You know, Target.
And it's not going backwards.
It is not going backwards. It is not.
Once that consumer is used to that experience, why do anything else, right? So I wanted to just jump in on that because, you know, it takes us a while to get into a groove of something as consumers, but once we're there and it's friction free and we're happy with it, we're not going back.
Right. It is so true. I know myself now where, where we live, Ken, we are fortunate where we have so much around us that we can drive to it and get it, right? That's not the case with everybody across the United States. But I know for myself, if I could order it online and get it, and I don't have to leave my house and go potentially get exposed to COVID, I'm ordering it online right now and having it come to me. I was speaking with someone last week that their business is geared towards an older demographic, and they've always struggled with their demographic because they've always gone to retail because it's an older demographic. They typically don't go online. But now with COVID, they've been forced to go online because the retail stores are closed. They weren't able to go into retail. Their business is up 400% right now. And when I was having this conversation, he says, we've struggled for years to how are we going to get our demographic pushed to ordering online? And now with COVID, they've been forced to. And he said, he goes, we don't see it going backwards. These people are ordering online now. They know how to do it. They're comfortable with it. They don't need to leave their home. Even when retail stores do start opening, he's like, it's not going to go backwards. Their business is going to continue to boom on the e-commerce side.
And the technology has caught up to make it friction free for that demographic, because it is a button. It is you push here, click, add to cart, it's done. Yeah. Providing you set up your systems that way. So let's talk about, we talked about, why it's important to have a third party 3PL, but what specific, if you could say three things, Debbie, that if you're considering doing direct to consumer and you have a question about whether your fulfillment situation can handle it, what are the three things that people need to know about outsourcing a 3PL that they probably don't even see coming, and they don't even understand it's going to be a problem later on if they haven't researched it? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things and one of the biggest reasons people do outsource is scalability. It's key. We have 4 facilities today, and as I said, we're growing. We have that ability to scale. So as they have these increases in their e-commerce business, and a lot of people are right now and having substantial increases, outsourcing to a third party, especially somebody with multiple facilities, having that scalability. For someone trying to do it themselves, as an example, they may only have one location. With outsourcing, multiple locations. What does that mean? That means by shipping from multiple locations, one, there could be a savings on freight.
Yep.
Especially if you have a product that's heavy. The heavier the product, if you're shipping it all the way across the country to, from one coast to the other, that's the most expensive. By having multiple facilities, you can have a significant savings in freight. Also, time in transit to the consumers. As I mentioned, consumers now, they have very, very high expectations. They order something and they want it quickly. And so by outsourcing, not only is the scalability, but having, that multiple DCs where, you can have that savings from the freight side and also just time in transit to the consumer. Well, you said 3 things. I could name more.
No, I know that's great. So I can see this can go on and on. I mean, scalability, locations,
yes,
cost,
yeah.
and cost to the consumer eventually, right? Correct.
Yeah,
then
I was going to say
the time it takes to the consumer.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say, and this is so important, is technology. Technology is also it's so important, especially, and like I said, I think that we're going to continue to see that continue to evolve.
And especially because that's your business. You have to be up to speed on technology. You don't have a choice. If you're doing it yourself, you may just skate by and it just doesn't work together. And then, like you said, if for some reason you have a product that's successful, people want it and they want a lot of it,
yeah,
you could do your brand more damage by not being prepared than it would cost you to work with a third-party 3PL that does this as their expertise.
Correct. And the other thing, when you had mentioned cost, we have relationships with the carriers. We've got deep discounted shipping rates. We have access to shipping programs that maybe someone on their own wouldn't have access to. So also being able to leverage that, cost that, the labor, taxes, insurance, leasing. I mean, there's so many, costs involved in trying to do it yourself versus outsourcing. And by outsourcing, you can then focus on, building the business and growing it, and let an expert, take care of all of the logistics for you.
I'm going to ask a poll question for everybody who's listening, and we'll get some feedback on it. So the question is, does your current 3PL do direct-to-consumer fulfillment? It's a simple yes, no, maybe, I don't know. So I'll leave that out there, and the comments will come in. But that should be a good barometer to find that out. To find that out first before you get into it. What's interesting, Debbie, is that I can tell you, we put together commercials. We put together all type of performance marketing, direct response, digital, social, television, everything. I could tell you that the conversations for putting together the main message are not as complicated as the conversations that you have with those clients, right? I mean, I say this, and I think this is really important for people who are listening and seeing this, is that when you're doing a direct to consumer campaign, it's like an iceberg, right? So the tip of the iceberg is that message, but the underneath that iceberg are the logistics, are how you are going to get product from your warehouse or your product to consumer. Make sure that that whole journey is fantastic. And then you have the data and reporting. I mean, let's just talk about data and reporting. That's a whole nother conversation, but data and reporting is something that is very important that A2B offers, correct?
Correct. Yes. So we've invested a lot of time and money in our reporting tool. So we have an online portal that our customers have access to. It's called A2B Engage. It was actually built in a business intelligence platform, and it's all real time. And that is so important because not all fulfillment companies are real time. Some do inventory updates, end of day once all movement has stopped. Some do it once, midday, end of day. But, you can log in the morning and things look one way. And as orders ship, you can log in later in the day and it's going to look completely different. But for our portal, there's things like, inventory, shipped orders, receipts, returns, shipping trends, order trends, exceptions. It is a wealth of data at their fingertips, which is so important. I hear time and time again as customers come on board or we do demos of our system, is we're, talking to prospects and people are just, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have access to all of this, because a lot of times they don't. There's some other fulfillment companies out there that have systems that they built, themselves, and they're outdated, and so their reporting's limited. So reporting is
like
key.
It's like a black box. You don't know.
Yes.
You don't know what. And I think it's. I'm sorry, Debbie. I think it's really important to emphasize that, because here's why that reporting is so important in direct to consumer, is because when you're making media buying decisions, right? I see your head nodding already. When you're making media buying decisions, you have to know what kind of inventory you have and the data that you could provide, that if you spent X amount of dollars based on trends, we're gonna sell this much inventory, and you can't you shouldn't be making that media decision, or you should double down. I can't tell you how important that is. And I've seen it happen. And we have a client, one of the biggest brands in the world, and they make decisions based on what they have in inventory.
Yeah, what you said is so key there, Ken. And with our system in terms of inventory, so there's things that we do and our system does, and this is so important if you're doing a direct-to-consumer campaign. Things as simple as setting inventory thresholds at an item level. So when the inventory falls below that level, whoever you've designated on your team gets an email letting you know we're low on inventory. You get it every single day until we get inventory to bring it back above that set level. We've recently added a forecasting tool to our online portal as well, especially with our customers that utilize our bi-coastal solutions.
Wow.
So they always have the wrong inventory in the wrong warehouse. So it's been a struggle for some of our customers. And so we have added a forecasting tool, which is, based on actual sales, the last 7 days, the last 14 days, the last 21 days, and it helps them so they can look and say, and it turns colors, it goes from yellow to orange to red, like woo, you've got to pay attention. But having those tools in place to help, because that is so key, especially if you're spending all this money on a media buy and you don't have any inventory. Now you have unhappy customers because they're not getting their product.
And you've spent media and you've lost. You've lost money based on products that you've sold.
Yeah.
Think about that, right?
And not to mention then that it increases your customer service cost, because now they're calling wanting to know where their order is. Then they're canceling if it's taking too long. So inventory is key. And so having all of those, with the systems, with the notifications and the forecasting, that's key.
Yeah. It's interesting. I literally sat and watched this 2 weeks ago. One of our clients, they do their own fulfillment in Ohio. They have a very successful campaign that we've had the opportunity to work with them on. And I was asking him, how much did the television layered onto his digital, how much did it increase his business? And he said 30%. Well, when you're doing thousands of orders a day, 30% is a lot. And I said to him, I go, so you have a scaling issue. And his face went white. He's like, I can see this. And I go, well, what's your solution? He goes, he's looking at me, he goes, I have to invest in probably an $800,000 API system to understand what I have in inventory and all those types of things. So those are good growth problems. But if you don't want to have those and you want to work with someone who does that is one of the scenarios that A2B solves immediately, right?
Correct. And in that situation, you have two options. And I've seen it happen both ways. They decide as a company, we don't want to make this $800,000 investment. We'd rather put that money elsewhere. And then they go, and sometimes they'll move everything, to a 3PL. I understand sometimes they are in a situation where they can't. They either own a building or they're in the middle of a lease and they still have, time left on that. They have staff that, that they have that they don't want to lay off. And I completely understand all of that. The other thing that I've seen is where they outsource that portion of the business. And some of the brands that we work on together with, Ken, we just do the direct response side of fulfillment only. They continue doing all of their retail and everything else they do, and we just take that portion of the business only, so that you don't have to make that $800,000 investment, and where we can step in and help with a portion of it.
And I could say they unequivocally all say it's the best decision they've ever made.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a question that we have, and the question is from Vanessa, and she asks, can a 3PL help me compete against major online shippers?
Absolutely. Well, so I want to make sure I understand when defining major online shippers, for example, Amazon as an example. Okay, that's the biggest one out there. And then Walmart's a big one also. Yes, a 3PL absolutely can help you with, and this is where having multiple locations, that's key. Because as with these major online shippers, they have multiple DCs. Now, that doesn't mean that they have inventory in every single DC, because that doesn't make sense either. You want to have that balance of not having too many DCs, but having the right amount to reach, the a certain percentage of the population, within a certain time frame. So you need a 3PL that has multiple facilities. And then you really need a 3PL that has good relationships with the carriers and good discounted rates. And typically, the more volume that somebody's shipping, the better their rates are. And then on top of that is, and this is key, having a sophisticated shipping system. So what does that mean? That means that having a shipping system where you can rate shop packages based on either cost. So you can rate shop this package and say, okay, based on the weight and dimensions of the package and where it's shipping to, send it the cheapest method. You can also rate shop it based on a time in transit goal. So for example, I want this package to get there in 2 days, as an example. The system will rate shop it, and if it can go ground and get there in 2 days, which is far less expensive than shipping it 2-day air, it's going to send anything ground that it can, and then anything outside that 2-day radius, it sends it air. 3-day just extends that. And then the other thing that I want to point out is, it's not just having multiple DCs; it's also having them in the right locations, because unpack that a little bit. So for example, we have 3 locations in the Southeast. Okay, if you look at a population map of the United States, the bulk of the population is east of the Mississippi River. So having something east is key, because that's where the bulk of the population is. And then having something west, as an example, when we looked to add our West Coast location, we did a ton of research. And we went to the carriers and said, okay, where, if we added a second location west, what's the most what would be the ideal location? They actually came back with Fresno, California. But we as a company didn't want to make the move to California for a lot of, just tax reasons, cost, all of that. It's expensive. So then we were looking at Las Vegas, we were looking at Reno, we were looking at Salt Lake City and Ogden, Utah. Las Vegas got taken off the list very quickly because you reach Southern California quickly, but the Northwest, it was a 3-day time in transit. We were wanting to reach as much of the U.S. as we could reach within 1 to 2 days via ground.
Right. And one thing that I would, which never occurred to me until I started learning more about what our clients are doing and how they're using direct-to-consumer 3PLs. And for example, there's a mindset, well, I'm just going to ship my stuff in from China into the port of Long Beach, when actually it makes more sense to go to Georgia, right?
You are so right, Ken. Yes. Yes.
Let's talk about that because when you're talking about 70 plus of the population east of the Mississippi, why would you go to Long Beach when you can go to Georgia? You just don't think of that.
Yeah. So so when I first started at A2B, there was a project underway to widen and deepen the Panama Canal because the largest cargo ships could not get through to get to the East Coast. They could only come to the West. So smaller cargo ships were coming to the East. There was more and more and more of a demand to bring more to the East Coast for exactly what you said, Ken. The bulk of the population is east, so why bring everything in through Southern California and then rail it or truck it all the way across the country? Or let's say you don't rail it all the way across the country to your warehouse or a fulfillment company, but maybe you have a location in California, let's say. Now, even though it's coming in through California and going, now you're shipping the bulk of your packages across the country. And those, depending on the weight, you can actually end up paying more that way versus if you just brought it in through the East Coast. So Savannah, Georgia, that's the port that's closest to our facilities. I mean, it's actually the fastest growing port in the U.S. The state has invested a lot of money and support behind. They added more berths to take in more ships. And all of that, but definitely more and more now, especially the project has been completed a couple of years ago with the Panama Canal. That definitely opened up more and more you see coming into the East Coast, and I think that will also continue to more shift that way. Right.
And going back to something that you were talking about, whether it was 3 days by air or 3 days by freight, there's going to be a different cost. The reality is the package doesn't care. The package doesn't care whether it's flying or going on a truck, right? As long as it's 3 days, the most efficient dollar amount as possible.
Correct.
Yeah. So, wow. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I think the information that you have given has been really, really helpful, and I really appreciate it. And I really want people who are listening to this to understand specifically, the differences and why actually outsourcing could potentially be a better option, even though you have all the warehouses and inventory or infrastructure. It pays to have the conversation. So for people who are listening who have that kind of situation, what's the best way that someone can get a hold of you to have that conversation about, what do I do? Is this the right thing? Because I can tell, I can just say from experience from our clients, it's worth the conversation to understand.
Absolutely. So you can reach me a couple of different ways. By phone, toll free, it's 866-843-3827. And I am at extension 2110. Or you can reach me by email, and it's D Skerly. So that's D as in Debbie, S as in Sam, Kerly at a2bf.com. So that's going to be letter A, B as in letter A, the number 2, B as in boy, F as in Frank.com. And one of the things that you pointed out earlier, Ken, with your poll about, does your current fulfillment company ship direct to consumer? I would just highly recommend, if they say yes, ask who they're shipping direct to consumer for. I see it time and time again that people say, yes, we do it, or yes, we can do it. Is it worth putting your brand at risk to be the guinea pig, to be the first one that they try to figure that out with? But I find so time and time again, people say, yes, we do it, and they don't do it. So if they say they do it, ask more. Who are you shipping direct to consumer for? Ask about their systems. dig into a little bit more. We have a checklist on our website. We actually have a checklist, and then we also have an ebook that we published on your guide to choosing the right fulfillment partner. And the checklist
so that's
has
great.
some
And
great.
They can find that on the A2B website, and they can get that information. Okay,
absolutely.
Great.
Yep. So we've got some downloads there. The checklist is wonderful because it just kind of goes through step by step, and I just highly recommend. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions. Even if you have a long relationship with someone, I get questions all the time. Ask though, definitely, because I've seen it time and time again where they've been told we do it and then they don't, and it can lead to a lot of headaches, unfortunately.
And what I know, specifically from working together for many years in our team at M2, is that what Debbie just said is so worth it. It will not only save you money, it'll save you brain cells. It will save you brain cells.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, when you are responsible for something at a business, you want to have as much information as you can to make the best possible decision for what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said is a great way to start there.
Yeah. And the other thing that I just want to throw out there that is so important, it is a true partnership. Our customers, we really do view it as a partnership. We are an extension of their business because we are. I mean, we're shipping the product. We're answering the phone when they're calling customer service. They think that they're calling their corporate office.
The customer doesn't know the difference.
They don't know the difference.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, it's a lot like how we run our business, is that when you look at it as a partnership, it behooves you to do whatever you need to do to make it as cost effective, as friction free, as painless for them. Because if it's that for them and it's successful, then you have a long-term relationship with them, and everybody wins.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So in closing, we talked about, what are the three must-haves? What are the three things you must know about a 3PL in a direct-to-consumer campaign? And those are these. What are they, Debbie? Give me the top level three.
Well, so what's important? You need to make sure if you're selecting someone, they have scalability.
Scalability.
That's key, and especially in today's world that we're living in, the scalability is very, very important. Bi-coastal locations, having somebody that has multiple locations.
Location.
Absolutely. And then I'm going to kind of throw technology and systems and reporting all together, because that kind of all falls in the IT bucket. But that is so important. All of the technology to the systems. And that's not just warehouse management system and inventory. That's also your shipping system, and the reporting tool, having access to that data right at your fingertips. All of that, and so I think those are really, really important.
Yeah, I know you can go really deep there, but I think it's really important to give three things that you need to know, that, especially from someone like yourself, Debbie, who has extensive knowledge on that. It's, scalability, location, and the data and systems. Those are the three things you need to know about, and you need to dig deep on them. And like Debbie said, and I'm going to toot your horn for you, is that you have the information, you've written the papers, people have access to get some information ahead of time before they even decide that's what they want to do. And that's such a wonderful service that you guys provide.
Yeah. And I think that, and I left this off the list of the top three because it's a given, and we've talked about it a lot, but you need to make sure, if you're doing direct to consumer, you need to make sure you're working with someone that has that experience, understands it. That is crucial.
Right. Like you said, you don't want to be the guinea pig. We say the same thing in our business. Have they done direct to consumer advertising and response driven advertising? Well, I highly recommend, whether it's us or not, you better work with someone who knows what they're doing, because it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and you touched on something, Ken, that if somebody's doing television, that's a whole different animal. And that gets even more specific and even more important to work with somebody that understands television, because that is different than e-commerce. And I know that it's very similar, but it is different down to systems, vendors, integrations, peaks and valleys, the spikes with the media buys. All of that, the offers. So that gets even more now specific. So not only do you need somebody that understands direct to consumer, but if you're going to be doing television, you definitely want to be working with someone that understands that.
Yes, absolutely. You know, in closing, what I wanted to say, and I mentioned this earlier, is that this conversation we're having today is so timely, Debbie, because we all understand what we're going through over the last 6 months, and we don't know what the end is going to, look like in this pandemic. But what has happened is it's accelerated what was going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years anyways. And that was technology, consumer behavior, and what we're going through now has created this perfect storm where if you do not go to the store because you don't want to, because you have other concerns, or you've gone to the store and you can't get what you want because the distribution is quote unquote broken or needs to be reconfigured, what are your options? Well, your options are to stay at home and do what you need to do. Well, that is exactly why we're having that conversation, because this situation has accelerated that the technology is even more friction-free than it's ever been. It's becoming very simple, and consumer behavior is getting more comfortable with it, and we're not going backwards. So if you are not thinking about adding a direct-to-consumer channel to your business, you better start thinking about it, because it's not going backwards.
It is so true. It's so true. And that's where also, and I know we keep talking about this, but that's where also, if you've never done direct to consumer, let's say that you're only doing retail and you've never done it, finding someone that has that experience. Perfect example, we had someone come on board beginning of last year, big brand, huge in retail. They had never done e-commerce. They'd never done direct to consumer. And we were part of the RFP process. But with our experience, we were able to point things out to them that they never even thought of. For example, the packing slip, something so simple as the packing slip where, different, depending on what the customer orders, they can get a different packing slip that has a different message on it. To making recommendations on the packaging. That's big when somebody places an order, especially if it is a higher price point, you want to feel good about that package in your purchase when it arrives. So you want it to have a nice presentation. Something as simple as shipping in a box versus a poly mailer. That can have a very different appearance when it arrives. And so that's when working with an expert that can really take you through that process from A to Z, and really go through everything with you and hand hold you through that process by having someone that has that experience. I didn't mention this, but we've been in business for 19 years. January will be 20 years that we've been in business. We have that experience.
Right.
And so, we can really hand hold them through that process. And so if they've never done e-commerce, and trust me, there's a lot of people right now that are scrambling to get their sites up and going and making the move away from retail. And it's so important. Again, not only someone that a 3PL that does direct to consumer fulfillment, but somebody that has that experience that can help them on the front end so that they're setting things up properly and setting themselves up for success and not for failure.
Right. It's the been there, done that. We've been there, we've done that, and you can see this movie. You can see the movie coming. Let me help you way ahead of time so we don't have to deal with this later, right?
Yeah. No, it's and I know it sounds so simple, but it's even just taking 30 minutes and having a conversation with someone, it is well worth the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really, really want to thank you for your time today. And I'm so glad we got into, we went a little bit longer than I want to, but I'm so glad we did, because the information that you just gave is phenomenal. And I've seen it personally with our business, how A to B operates. And I'm not trying to make an infomercial for A to B, but I will, because we do a lot of work together. And I know you and I know the brands that we share, do business with, and we continue to do business with. And there's a reason why these big brands are working with A to B. And that goes back to that experience. So Debbie, I want to thank you very, very much. And I appreciate your time. And I look forward to following up on this on another discussion. And specifically, I'd love to get into a conversation where I can get permission from some of our clients, and we can really unpack some things so people can understand what the service you provided and how we work together and how it could benefit them.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.